Hello, and welcome back to the Daily Bible Summary, where the goal is to renew your mind as we read a new chapter every day and ask, what can I learn? Today's episode is entitled, He is Risen. Read Mark chapter 16 if you have not, and if you have, let's get started. Before we begin, you should know that there are textual questions surrounding Mark 16. Do verses 9 through 20 actually belong in this gospel? Some of our early copies of Mark, going back to the 4th and 5th century, end at verse 8, while others include verses 9 through 20. Now, I'm going to treat verses 9 through 20 as scripture, but here's what's important. Every teaching in these verses is confirmed elsewhere in the New Testament. So whether you accept these verses as original Mark or not, the truth that they contain, the teaching that they contain, is still solidly biblical. So let's go ahead and take a look at what Mark tells us. In today's episode, the Sabbath has passed. Very early in the first day of the week, Sunday, when the sun has risen, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome head to the tomb. Remember, they had been watching to see where Jesus had been laid. They're bringing spices to anoint Jesus' body, which they had not had an opportunity to do before his burial. On the way, they're asking each other, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb, since it was large and it was very heavy. But when they get there, they see the stone has already been rolled back, and entering the tomb, they see a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side. Naturally, they would be alarmed by this. But the young man, clearly an angel, tells them not to be alarmed. He knows that they are seeking Jesus. And then he gives them the greatest news in human history. He is risen. He is not here. And he invites them, see the place where they laid him. The angel then instructs them to go tell the disciples and Peter that Jesus is going ahead of them to Galilee, where they will see him just as he had said. Notice that Peter is specifically mentioned by name. Probably, after his denials, Peter needed to hear that he wasn't going to be excluded, that Jesus still wanted him. The women go out fleeing from the tomb, trembling and astonished. And they say nothing to anyone because they are afraid. Now, if Mark's gospel had ended here at verse 8, it would be a very abrupt ending. Such abruptness does not complete the very heart of the gospel message, and that heart is that Christ died and was resurrected. So at least for this reason, I will treat the following as, gospel. Now, when Jesus rose on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. Then she went and told those who had been with him, as they were mourning and they were weeping. But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they didn't believe it. Think about that for a moment. Mary brings them the news that Jesus is alive, and they don't believe her. Even after everything Jesus told them about rising on the 3rd day, they were not accepting this news. After this, Jesus, hiding his identity, appears to 2 disciples as they're walking in the countryside. Luke 24 tells us more about this and that they were traveling to Emmaus. And after they did recognize Jesus, they go back and tell the rest. But once again, the disciples do not believe them. The pattern here is pretty clear. Resurrection testimony, refusal to believe. Resurrection testimony, refusal to believe. These aren't gullible people looking for any excuse to believe. They are heartbroken men who need to be convinced. Afterward, Jesus appears to the 11 as they're reclining at table. He rebukes them for their unbelief and hardness of heart because they did not believe those who had testified about his resurrection. And then he gives them their mission. Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Let's stop there for a moment. This is the mission. Proclamation of Jesus, his life, his death, his burial, his resurrection, and his future return. But what then? Are they just proclaimers and no one need do anything? Of course not. He also says, whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. The first part of this is a command to the apostles. The second part helps them to identify who has now entered a relationship with Jesus after hearing the message that they are going to proclaim. The gospel goes to everyone, not just Jews, not just the righteous, the whole creation. And then the response required is faith and baptism. Belief without baptism? Jesus says that's not part of the pattern, and baptism is part of the response to the gospel. Jesus also tells them signs will accompany those who believe: casting out demons, speaking in new tongues, handling serpents without harm, or drinking poison without harm, healing the sick by laying hands on them. These signs were going to authenticate the apostles' message in the early church, and we see that it happened throughout the book of Acts. After speaking to them, the Lord is taken up into heaven and sits down at the right hand of God. Now he's ruling on his throne. He's not just alive, he's ruling. He's exalted. He is now reigning as king. Mark concludes by saying that the disciples go out and preach everywhere, while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the message by accompanying signs. That's how Mark ends, not with fear and silence, but with proclamation and power. So what can we learn? First, the resurrection is God's verdict on Jesus' innocence. The earthly courts condemned Jesus as a blasphemer and criminal. They crucified him between two thieves, but God raised him from the dead. That's God's declaration. Jesus is righteous, his claims are true, and death has no power over him. In fact, Paul makes that point in the first 4 verses of the book of Romans. He was declared to be the Son of God by the resurrection. Do you believe God's verdict, or do you believe the world's verdict about Jesus? The world still calls Jesus a good teacher at best, a deceiver at worst, but God says he's much more than that, much more than just a good teacher. He is Lord and Christ. He is the Lord and King. The empty tomb settles this question. So we might ask, how does the reality of the resurrection change what you believe and how you serve Jesus? Second, faith and baptism are both part of responding to the gospel. Jesus said whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. He didn't separate them. Belief leads to baptism. But why does it lead to baptism? It's because that's what the apostles would tell their audience to do and did tell them to do in Acts chapter 2. At the end of the day, when Peter went home, he would know how many were saved because of the message preached. However many had believed and were baptized were saved. Have you responded to the gospel with both faith and baptism? Some emphasize belief and neglect baptism. Some emphasize baptism and neglect faith. Jesus commands both. If you believe but have not yet been baptized, why not? What's keeping you from following Jesus in baptism? And that brings us to the end of Mark's gospel. We've walked with Jesus from his baptism to his resurrection. We've seen him teach, heal, confront, suffer, die, and rise again. And one major question echoing through this gospel is this: who do you say that Jesus is? Now Peter answered, "You are the Christ." The centurion said, "Truly this man was the Son of God." And the angels declared, "He has risen." Now it's your turn. Who do you say he is? And how will you respond? Tomorrow we'll move into the book of Luke. We'll see the life of Jesus again displayed from the standpoint not of eyewitnesses, but from an historian's viewpoint. Each day, as we read, we will continue to renew our minds.